we have the real importance of today's NFL free agency. Why are we talking about that on the home of the Cowboys, latest mock drafts, whatever you want to get into?
Yeah, let's talk about, we're going to get into some of these receivers who get traded here in a sec, but I wanted to talk about this that I'd seen over at The Athletic. So Robert Mays and Derek Klassen, who are two of the writers over at The Athletic, do one of their NFL podcasts. They had been doing a topic after the Eagles won the Super Bowl where they were just kind of looking at, okay, in the wake of Zach Bond being a Defensive Player of the Year candidate for the Eagles, value signing, but a guy who was a free agent addition. Saquon Barkley being a big-time player for the Eagles, and arguably the entire difference in them getting to the Super Bowl this year. And then you look over recent years, the Rams F them picks sort of mentality. The Chiefs having to go out there and say, okay, we're going to go sign a big-time free agent, a tackle to repair some of our issues. They were looking at the question of what does anecdotal research tell us about playing in free agency and how it has affected Super Bowl teams. How active have Super Bowl teams been?
Yeah.
And
because this has changed now. You know, when free agency first really, well, when I first think of free agency, I think of the Washington Redskins teams that went and tried to buy everyone.
Yeah,
and it was like, oh my gosh, we all fell for that. Then they stunk. It didn't work. You got the Ravens right down the road there where I grew up, just drafting and developing. So it used to be if you struck the first day or two of free agency, you were the loser. And I sat in silence last week. I wanted to see if RJ remembered any of his original takes, which of course he never does. And he was just mocking the Cowboys. Usually he'd applaud the Cowboys for not being involved in free agency. But he was sitting there mocking them, saying, it's worthless. Why are we talking about this? There's no point in it. So I was like, okay, are you moving on over to the Bobby Wagners of the world? Because he used to rule out everyone easily. If you're near 30, no. If you're playing defense, no. If you're a running back, no. And now all of a sudden he's changing on those things.
He's changing on a lot. You're noticing little subtle shifts here and there, but it's something where they were taking a look at how much does this actually help? How good is it? Because they had talked about, they looked at last year, if you looked at who's the most active team early in free agency, it was the Titans. And the Titans obviously finished with the number one pick, but there's
Jacksonville, like for the past couple of years, have been big spenders. We all in our minds say don't do it, but we all really want it to be done the first 48 hours.
Because it's fun. It's fun. And also you sit there and think to yourself, like, well, yeah, but like, I mean, this is an exception. Like you talk yourself into like, you want the fun addition. Just think how much fun it was for people. And these were not even massive acquisitions. Think about how much fun people had about, oh my gosh, we got Stephon Gilmore and Brandon Cooks past their prime. But people were excited because it was like, oh, I know that name. And that's somebody who maybe they're going to come in here and be a difference maker. Well, they had talked about that. Generally, the thought is when somebody plays in free agency early and spends a lot of money, their reaction last year when the Titans did it was, what good team does this? Like, good teams generally don't do this. And so they were taking a look at it and said that based on the way you look at acquisitions that are made, they still say that what they find is that Super Bowl teams that go to the Super Bowl generally have their core pillars in place. Rams are a great example of this. When the Rams went to the Super Bowl and everybody was like, man, look at how wild they were, and they just caution to the wind, and we're going to throw everything against the wall and see if it sticks. At the end of the day, their best player on offense was Cooper Kupp. Their best player on defense was Aaron Donald. Those two guys were players that they had drafted. This year, the fact that they were able to really kind of maintain being a competitive football team, despite a number of losses that they had, it's because they hit on a bunch of draft picks in a very short amount of time, especially on the defensive line with Jared Verse and some of the other guys that they've had there. So they looked at it and said that most of these teams generally have the pillars in place. They have the stars they need. And so what you're looking for is not a big-time splashy signing. What you're looking for is a $4 million signing here, a $2 for $10 million signing there. Just guys that give you enough that you're getting the most out of your star players. That description to me still sounds like the Dallas Cowboys. I will say that I think it was broken about 2 years ago. I think the Chiefs broke it. But if you look at over the last 12 years, I think all but one season, every team that won the Super Bowl gave more guaranteed money to a free agent signing the offseason before than the Cowboys gave in guaranteed money to their entire free agent class. And so that speaks to, you don't want to be the Titans. You don't want to be the Jaguars, who, like you mentioned, they're the Jags. Tony Khan said a couple weeks ago, we're reevaluating what we do now because we spent all this money and we do this, and it's backfiring on us. It's not working. Maybe you shouldn't just throw money at Christian Kirk, though. Maybe that's a bigger issue. But looking at it and saying, we've got to do things a little bit differently. The problem is that you can't go so far off to the other extreme like Dallas did last offseason, where they said, we're signing no one. We're going to sign no one, and we are going to bank on and put a ton of pressure on our personnel department to don't you miss a pick. None of them. If it's in the first 4 or 5 rounds, can't miss it. And I think that over there, they like working under the high expectations. They like those sort of things. But the reality is that no matter how good you are at drafting, you're going to have misses in there. It's just the math of it, and the inexact science that exists of it. So if your entire strategy is we're going to bank on every pick being right, okay, well, now you've set yourself up for at some point you are going to miss something and you're going to go 7-10, or you're going to potentially set yourself back for a couple years if you have a couple of them in a row. And so the overall thought from The Athletic was that you have to play moderately in this area, but you still can't be a first day of free agency type of signer, even though Saquon Barkley was that kind of guy. At the end of the day, a lot of people would still say Zach Bond, who was a value guy and a 1-year free agent guy, that was the bigger signing that had impact on the defensive side of the ball, almost as much as the one that they had with Barkley. But I still look at this as, I think Dallas is going to be, I got asked this the other day when I was doing a podcast with somebody. They had said, do you think that the Joneses gave us a little bit of like light at the end of the tunnel at the Schottenheimer press conference? It sounded like they were saying they were more willing to play. No.
I wasn't hearing that. I felt like Steven was saying it just to say it. Oh, it was got to reevaluate.
Yeah, and I think, look, this week will be great when we're out there in Indianapolis for the Combine, because you'll start to hear from people who are chatting. You'll get an idea of what their strategy is. Or you'll hear, oh, so-and-so is going to be sitting on the bus later this week. You'll start hearing, okay, who are they? How active are they in talking to agents who are representing players that are outside of their own roster and guys that could be out there as free agents? I think when we get out there, we're going to hear they're trying to cover contingencies. They're trying to get value signings. They just got to make sure that they're not swinging and missing and then jumping into training camp like they did last year and going, where's a Carl Lawson that we can find? Where's an Al-Qadim Muhammad? How do we find people to just fill out our roster because it's so thin right now? That's the problem. Yeah, Dalvin Cook and all those questions that come from that. So that's the biggest thing for them, is they need to make sure that they are replenishing the depth that they're inevitably going to lose this year.
The answer to the free agency thing right now, according to The Athletic, is the medium porridge. Don't go hot. Don't go scalding hot. Don't be ice cold like the Cowboys. Go right there in the middle.
Just right. Just like Goldilocks. That's what it is. Now, if you did want to play in the waters of saying, hey, we need to go ahead and replenish or look for a genuine starter somewhere, I think one of the easier places you can do it is probably receiver. And Bill Barnwell had an article up last week where he had just looked at, hey, here are the top receiver options that you're looking for if you're a team that would be available in free agency or trade. So these are the trade candidates that they've got here. I'm just going to run through some of them. If you're interested in somebody or you want to stop down, we can talk about them. Tyreek Hill from the Dolphins.
I'd be interested for a little short term, not too expensive, which is probably not going to happen.
No, because so here's the thing: you could probably handle taking on his cap number. We went over the math earlier this year, but you could handle taking on his cap number. It would just be an issue of, part of the reason he's upset is they want guarantees. They want to try to establish a baseline of he's comfortable, he's in place. So the trade itself wouldn't take on a big hit. You're just then immediately going to have to spend some money on.
Plus, I'm probably thinking it's a second round pick, and I don't know picking at 12 with all these needs if I'm down for that.
Here's an interesting name: Deebo Samuel. So I think Deebo could be a decent value buy. This is a problem though. Last week, George Kittle had been given an interview and they were talking about Deebo wanting out and potentially getting traded. And Kittle had said something to the effect of, yeah, I mean, if Deebo's gone, we're going to have to essentially change the identity of our offense because of how intricate he is to it. Deebo is such a unique player in the style play that it's kind of like when we had the Luka question for so long. you couldn't just plug and play anybody in there. You have to kind of structure your offense around what he does.
And I worry about him breaking down. He just turned 29. He's one of these guys, right? It's like driving to the lane. John Morant, Allen Iverson. You know, how reckless are you going to be with your body? And I just see more and more games missed for Deebo moving forward at this age with the way you have to use him.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly it because of the physicality that he plays with and the ability to break down. That's why he wanted to get paid so much and just like, I need my money now is because of that.
If I made him strictly a receiver, we're not handing the ball off. He's not returning any kicks. He's a 2?
Yeah, at this point, I think he probably is. A couple years ago.
Is he an Anquan Bolden type 2? Like, he's not beating you down the field. He's not using speed.
He can. He's such a different type of player than exists in the NFL. There's just the way that he plays is a lot of run after catch stuff. He has shown that he can win deep, but it's just typically not how the 49ers have used him. He's not like the most precise route runner, but look, I mean, if they want edge and if they want, you know, sort of a different type of presence, he certainly would bring that, and he would be a number 2 here. These are cut candidates for Barnwell, guys that you wouldn't be trading for, guys that'll get cut. Davante Adams.
What he did with that locker room scared me, which you mentioned last week. He's done it with the Raiders. I don't necessarily know about the Jets' nightmares, but I would sign him up for cheap. I still think he can do damage.
Yeah, I feel like
I'd love him as a 2 without all the drama.
And I don't think there's any chance, given what we've heard from him, he would accept being a 2. You know what I mean? Like, it felt like last year he was a little upset, like playing second fiddle to Garrett Wilson at all. Christian Kirk from the Jaguars, speaking of Tony Khan and poor decisions made financially.
You just crapped on him twice.
Yep, I did. Cooper Kupp, who we've talked about this. Junior Adams, the new receivers coach for the Cowboys, that was Cooper Kupp's college receivers coach, who Kupp had called him the best coach he had ever played for, or something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing. But if Kupp, you don't have to trade anything for him and the Rams get to a point where they have to cut him, I think that makes a ton of sense to target as that's the guy. Because he's somebody who, as a number 2, playing with some of the depth you have, I think he could fit in.
I'd be excited, but worried. I'd be excited but scared about the health. Would you rather have Kupp or Deebo?
Kupp, I think.
Is Deebo going to be a free agent?
No, Deebo would be a trade candidate.
Yeah. Yeah, Kupp moves up the list because you don't have to give up assets.
Yeah, and
you have to give that up for Tyreek. Is Davante a free agent, did you say?
No, Davante would be a cut candidate. So if the Jets get to a point where they're just like, we can't find anybody to take this on, then they would have to release him. And that's kind of what they're looking at there. But it's something where I think that if Kupp makes a ton of sense just from what Schottenheimer likes to do, different things like that.
Kupp can do anything.
Yeah, as long as other than stay healthy.
Yeah.
That's kind of it. Another name to watch here if they talk about cut candidates, Tyler Lockett had the best success of his career. Now, he's getting older, but he had the best success of his career under Brian Schottenheimer, and he's somebody who the Seahawks could be looking at as, all right, aging veteran. We might need to cut him. He's going to be 32, though, and a smaller player.
Some of the wide receivers to keep an eye on as we head out to the NFL Combine in